Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast, powered by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, episode number 202. Cole Reid, Stewards of the Wildlife, Hunting with Conservation. Please support our sponsors as they make this show possible. Today's show is sponsored by Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, Covert Scouting Cameras, the Horny Buck Seed Company, the Euro Hanger, and Morse's Sporting Goods. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level.
Hi, this is Dan Infold from HuntingBeast.com. You're about to listen to one of my favorite podcasts, Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast.
Hey y'all, this is Heather Shepard with To Be Outdoors and the Dixie Deer Classic. You are about to tune in to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
I'm James Blankenbeckler from Open Season TV, and you're about to listen to my favorite podcast, the Big Buck Registry.
Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. Sitting here in the studio with my good buddy Dusty Phillips in our Ohio studios, and I'm in New Hampshire, and we're kicking off another great interview here. So what's going on, Dusty?
Oh, man, just living the dream, another great podcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in with us every week. It just continues to get better, Jay, and we appreciate that.
It does. I'm going to jump right into an email we got from Trevor. He's in Maine, and this is relative to our harness program. And Trevor writes, Love Show 200. Wow. I am in dire need of a safety harness. I use the platform stand about 3x3 and 20 feet off the ground. It was on a property when I moved here. I sit in a folding chair on it. I have an old cable guy harness that is too small and has way too much metal rings to clang around. Problem is, budget doesn't allow me to get a new one. If you still have any, I would be forever grateful. Keep up the great work. Thank you for your time. By the way, I'm an XXL. So thank you, Trevor, for your letter. We will drop a harness in the mail to you. I don't know if they come in various sizes. I think we just have one adult size, but I'll ship one out to you. And thank you for your email. It's a pretty good email.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate him reaching out to us, and best of luck in the whitetail woods this year.
Dusty, what do you think about when you think about conservation?
Well, there's all different aspects to conservation. It's not only lands management, or a lot of people look at it as just land management, or it's healthy herds, it's habitat, it's food sources. There's all kinds of different viewpoints of conservation. Today's
guest is a heavy-duty conservationist. He spends a lot of time with the white rhino, and the white rhino's horn is particularly sought out after by the Far East in the ancient medicinal practices. So there's a deep-rooted underground black market type of structure and big dollars for this kind of stuff. And it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. So he's trying to figure out how to balance the almost lack of conservation efforts and the lack of hunting efforts that are going on in South Africa with this, to the point where the numbers have dwindled down to about 18,000 in the world or so. He is trying to start a herd of 2,500 in Texas, so that if and when the population gets so far below where it really should be, that they have essentially a starter culture where they can tap back into the DNA that was once there and repopulate areas, and in hopes that the conservation built in with the hunting efforts can get better where it's at, and hopefully somehow in the future change the demand for the rhino horn. So we decided to have Cole Reid on the show, and we're going to talk to Cole, but not in just the sense of the white rhino. We're talking about global concepts regarding conservation, and how much hunting needs conservation and how much conservation needs hunting, and how they typically go hand in hand until populations drop so low because of mismanagement and mispractice. And we talk even about the deer herd in the United States. So Cole is actually a pretty hardcore deer hunter. He says he's killed many a deer, and when I asked him about his most memorable deer hunt, he goes, "Oh man, there's so many." So he's not just your conservationist like you might think of. He's thinking in a global sense, thought-wise, but also globally, physically wise, about how all this stuff is pieced together. Let's turn over to Jim Keller with the deer news, and we'll come back with Cole Reid.
The deer news this week is sponsored by the Euro Hanger. You don't have to spend big bucks to hang your big buck. Get yourself a Euro Hanger. Facebook.com/Eurohanger, EUROHANGER.
For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News. Our first story this week, Coyote Challenge offers Georgia hunters prizes for kills. This story was featured in the Forsyth County News website. More than 160 coyotes have been killed across the state since the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Coyote Challenge started in April. The challenge allows hunters and trappers the chance to win a lifetime sporting license by harvesting up to 5 coyotes each month and presenting the carcass at a DNR field office. Each kill counts as one entry in the monthly raffle, and so far more than 40 people have participated. Coyotes are now present in large numbers in every county in Georgia, according to Tina Johansson, Program Operations Manager at the DNR's Wildlife Resource Division. They range from 15 to 30 pounds and usually travel in packs. The challenge lasts until August and was intended to make news and inform property owners about their rights, given that coyotes are unprotected, invasive animals who prey on calves, chicken, and other livestock and pets. DNR plans to continue its Coyote Challenge from April to August next year, Johansson said. That covers fawning seasons for deer and nesting season for turkeys, when coyotes can do the most damage to game populations. The department is considering changing the program to increase participation next year to allow hunters and trappers to submit timestamp photos of their kills instead of requiring them to bring a carcass to a DNR office. DNR estimates that deer hunters kill about 75,000 coyotes, which can be heavy predators of fawn during the course of the deer season. Despite the huge culling every year, coyotes keep coming back. In the long run, Georgians will have to learn to live with the predators. This is about management, not annihilation, said Tina Johansson, the Program Operations Manager at the DNR's Wildlife Resource Division. City to keep using bow hunters to thin deer in Cincinnati's parks. This story was originally featured on the Cincinnati.com website and was reported by Mark Wirt. Bow hunters will once again be allowed into 10 Cincinnati parks this year amid evidence that the 10-year program has sharply reduced the deer population in Mount Airy Forest. In addition, the parks are considering adding more deer exclusions or fences to keep the animals out. Deer pose a threat to the flora of the city parks, especially Mount Airy and California Woods Nature Preserve, park officials say. The too numerous animals eat wildflowers such as trilliums and tree seedlings down to the ground. This cuts back on undergrowth and limits the future forest canopy, both of which can be important animal habitats. The destruction of beneficial plants also can allow invasive species to take over. In 2016, 157 hunters killed 139 deer in city parks. Just over half were taken at Mount Airy, which at almost 1,500 acres is Cincinnati's largest park. Mount Airy was established in 1911 out of several unproductive farms and was the first municipal reforestation in America. Aerial surveys of Mount Airy show the deer population is down 70% from its peak in 2001 before the hunting program began. The other parks in the hunting program are Alms, Alt, Drake, Glenway Woods, Magrish Perry, Miles Edward, Seymour Preserve, and Stanberry. The program, which has culled a total of 1,354 deer from the 10 parks, started with sharpshooters from the Cincinnati Police. After 2 years, volunteer bow hunters were brought in. The program requires closing some trails in the parks in late September and early October, but park officials limit closures to certain days and hours so people wanting to see the changing foliage colors can use the parks in safety and the hunters can operate without other human distractions. Night hunting was allowed at 4 parks in February. As pythons invade Florida, professional snake hunting becomes a booming industry. This story was originally featured on the Fox Science News website and was reported by Phil Keating. In a state known more for its alligators, there is a new job title, Pro Python Hunter. An estimated 100,000 pythons are living in and ravaging Florida's Everglades. They will eat at least 160 animals in 5 years and have no enemies. Even alligators are no match for the Burmese python. A 13-footer caught and killed recently had 3 baby deer in its belly. The invasive snakes got here after pet owners ditched them in the swamps, and over the years, they have multiplied exponentially. Florida Fish and Wildlife said the pythons have decimated the state's small animal population. In Miami-Dade County, the South Florida Water Management District decided Florida's python problem has become so big and so bad, paying for a quote-unquote python posse to find and kill them could be the answer. It's a 2-month, $175,000 pilot program. 25 python hunters get paid $8.10 an hour to drive, hike, and crawl in the hot and humid Everglades, looking for snake dens and wrestling the big beasts to the death. In 7 weeks, the 25 pros have killed and removed 149 pythons. The longest one was a 16-footer. Most are in the 7, 8, and 9-foot range. The hunters also get $50 for every snake they bag, and for each foot longer than 4, there is an additional $25. Florida has twice held well-publicized python challenges where 1,500 amateur snake hunters from around the country put their wrangling skills to the test. But Water Management District Dan O'Keefe said using the 25 experts and paying them is proving to be much more effective. About half the pythons captured and killed were females, and when each female can lay 40 eggs per clutch, that translates into thousands of additional baby pythons that will now never be born in the vastness that is the Florida Everglades. That concludes this week's edition of the Big Buck Registry Deer News. For links to the stories found this week, please check our show notes at www.bigbuckregistry.com. If you have any ideas for future topics or have questions about any of these topics, please email me at jim@bigbuckregistry.com. For the Big Buck Registry, this is Jim Keller with the Deer News.
Thanks to Jim Keller with the Deer News. Without further ado, here's Cole Reid.
Cole Reid, welcome to the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing well, man. It's we had some thunder boomers roll through here just recently and kicked us off the ball fields and got me home early for a little preparation to talk conservation with you.
Good. Yeah, we've actually been having quite a bit of weather ourselves. One of our most recent conservation projects is actually we've installed some live stream video cameras. One of them's gone in our reticulated giraffe barn for that breeding program, and another one's gone in the lemur atrium, and had a little bit of a windstorm knock down our giraffe camera. So we're going to get the lemur atrium one up on the website here pretty soon, but everybody's just going to have to wait on us for a little bit until we get the giraffe one back online from the wind.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're having some lemur video problems.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to get that corrected. Speaking of cameras and location, where are you from, Cole?
So I'm originally, I was actually born in Arizona, but I only spent 3 weeks of my life there. I really grew up in New Mexico, but it's one of those stories where I got to Texas as quick as I could, and I haven't looked back. And so now I currently live in Uvalde, Texas, which is about 90 miles west of San Antonio. Okay.
What drew you there?
It's the ranch. It was a family ranch that we'd had for a long time, and I was one of those people that grew up in New Mexico, hunting, fishing. I just grew up in the mountains, and if I could get outdoors, that's where I'd be. I was one of those guys that would miss homework assignments and tests for that big hunt or that big trip that I could take and be outdoors. And so I always had a connection to it. And I actually came down after high school and spent about 2 years just working on the property before I went to college, just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do and realize that this is 100% what I want to dedicate my life to. So went back up north for about 3-4 years, got a degree from Texas A&M University, and then came back down here and started my life.
No kidding. All right. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Who was your biggest influence growing up as relative to conservation and hunting?
It really, if there had to be one person, it'd be my father.
Okay. He's
the guy that took us out and he's the one that I shared all those adventures with. And, it's a funny thing, the position that I'm at now. There's no question, hunting's role in conservation. I'm a hunter and I'm a conservationist, and I'm proud to say both of those things, but I've kind of moved away from the hunting industry as a whole.
Right.
And I'm focusing more on the conservation side of the industry. And it was him that really helped me lead me to that. We just had this ranch for so long. And I guess, some of it may stem from the fact that these are our animals now. Now it's our charge of taking care of them on a day-to-day basis and feeding them and medicating them and raising them. And then, you go out and you harvest one, and you harvest the old reproductively insignificant males of the herd that have been kicked out, that are not going to reproduce anymore. And you turn money out of that animal that goes directly back into getting more animals, increasing the genetic diversity of that herd, increasing the herd size, increasing the number of species that you have on property. All of that is important, but it became more and more difficult for us to see that one harvested, and we wanted to spend more time making sure that they were alive.
Right.
So that's kind of where I am now. I'm still a hunter. I still absolutely support hunting. But I'm doing everything I can to keep them alive at this point.
Gotcha. It's an interesting dynamic because you're coming out of the hunting industry. That's where you think all the focus is. But there's really another group that's just as important, and that's the conservationist side of hunting. And it seems to me that you can't have one without the other. You have to have both.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. And I've told people before, I mean, you could easily get into the very definition of trophy hunting. That's an argument that I have with a lot of people, especially on a horned animal. Horned animals start growing their horns when they're born, and they continually grow them until they die.
Right.
So, and they don't stop. They just keep growing. So if you have an animal that is the biggest, it's because he's the oldest. And a lot of times in the wild, because nature's not as nice as we are, the oldest ones have been kicked out of the herd. They're living on their own or in a bachelor group, and they're reproductively insignificant to the herd. Now, if you have a hunter that goes out and shoots that animal just because of the size of his horns, and that's all that's in his heart and his mind, that may not be a good thing. But whether he likes it or not, by doing that, he has been involved with conservation.
Right.
The money that he spent, the reproductively insignificant male that he's removed from the herd in an ethical manner, instead of it dying of starvation or being eaten to death by a lion. I mean, so I agree with you. The two have to be interconnected. And sometimes even if your focus isn't conservation, whether you like it or not, you're involved with conservation.
Right.
So not only do the two need to go together, they always do go together.
Yeah. I think sometimes we kind of forget that we're doing that.
Right.
But there's also a group, I'm sure, that knows they're involved heavily.
For sure.
Because they spent their money on equipment and on licensing and travel and all that stuff. That there are definitely some direct paths to conservation through the money that the hunter spends.
For sure. And I would say that the vast majority of hunters are in that category,
right.
Are people that know that they're part of conservation and believe they're part of conservation and have a desire to be a part of conservation. I'd say that's the vast majority of hunters.
Right, exactly. So when you were growing up, I don't mean to change subjects, and I'm not.
No.
What was this is kind of one of our classic questions that we like to ask our guests. Do you remember the first firearm or weapon that you ever shot?
Yeah, yes, I do, actually. It was a 22 Ruger. Well, yeah, first firearm, I should say, because I grew up shooting BB guns and pellet guns, but it was a 22 Ruger pistol that we'd go out into the Mesa in New Mexico and shoot beer cans and Coke cans and stuff like that. I think I was probably 5 years old at that time.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
it's. I think those are special moments.
It was. Yes,
I still remember the same.
Because I remember them.
Exactly.
I'm almost 30 years old, and I still remember that experience.
Yeah,
so.
We all seem to remember the first gun we ever shot.
Yeah.
I don't know why exactly, but that we do. The make, model, and age usually of the firearm. And who gave it to you? Who was there?
It was my dad.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
That's cool. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the Stewards of Wildlife. I can tell you are a conservationist through and through, and that you have aptly connected hunting to conservation and vice versa, and that you get it. And you have some efforts, and you're connected to some groups that I think are pretty interesting, and I want to get into a lot of the trips that you've been on recently, because it sounds like you're going well beyond the whitetail. I mean, this stuff.
Yes, for sure.
And you were talking in generalities just a little bit ago about taking the oldest out of the herd, and that applies to more than just the whitetail. I would assume that applies to that's a generality that all hunters can relate to, and it doesn't matter to the species for the most part.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So tell me about the Stewards of Wildlife. What is that organization? How are you connected to it?
Yeah, so Stewards of Wildlife, I'm the director of wildlife sustainability. And Stewards of Wildlife is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's really dedicated to breeding, raising, and propagating species, both here in the United States as well as abroad. So there's two different types of conservation. There's in situ conservation, which is in country, which is their native lands. And then there's ex situ conservation, which is what we do on our property, which is, breeding non-native animals in a different location. So we support both of those. We currently own 3 southern white rhinos that are living in South Africa. Stewards of Wildlife owns them. We're caring for them. And they're going to stay there. And then the big project that we're working on right now, probably the biggest project, is we're trying to import 6 southern white rhinos from South Africa to Texas.
Okay.
And that's a programmatic idea that we have that hopefully will expand in the future. The goal is to have 2,500 individuals of the southern white rhino in the United States of America at some point in the future. So that doesn't mean that we're going to try to import 2,500. It means that through breeding and trading and increasing the herds and importation, that we'll have that 2,500 number, which is what the scientists have told us is the number that we need to have that species maintain evolutionary potential.
Okay.
Is at 2,500. So the plight of the rhino, it's going downhill. We all have seen it. The death rate is well beyond the birth rate. I think they're losing on average 3 rhinos a day. There's only 18,000 left. It's not going to take long for them to be extinct. So our thought process is we want to create a safety deposit box of genetics that the world can draw from in times of need. So we want to protect the cradle of genetics while creating a new one.
Okay. So let's look back at a little bit in history about why is the white rhino in the position it's in now? How did it get there?
It's done it twice now.
Okay. Actually,
and the first time, I'm trying to remember what the first time was, but the first time had a lot to do with the fact that the rhino was not privately owned. The only place that it existed was in parks and game reserves and national parks. And it almost went extinct in the 1950s, I believe. And the South African government decided to privatize them, and their numbers skyrocketed. The problem that we're facing now is that the Far Eastern cultural belief system has valued the rhino horn and what it is made out of unscientifically, I might add, that the price of the rhino horn is now above the most expensive drug. It's more expensive than any precious diamond, and it's a big problem because of the economic level that South Africa exists in. That the average person, what they make annually and what they could sell a 3-kilogram rhino horn for is 3-4 times their yearly salary. So
right.
It's a real bad problem, but it's really stemming from Far Eastern medical beliefs and poaching. I mean, they're going in and even if a rhino has been dehorned, properly, ethically by the landowner, and there's just a small bit of horn, or let's say that it's a 14-month-old. I spoke with a lady that runs a rehab center. They had poachers come in and shoot and poach a rhino that was 14 months old. I mean, it barely had any horn on its head, but they're still, even for the smallest amounts, they're going in there and poaching them.
So it's wild to me that you would, based off of an economic belief, or there's a belief in the medical system that
right.
Not here, that this stuff cures everything.
Right.
And driving that force is an economic stimulus. That's all the money's flowing to these probably underground type groups, right?
Right. Yes.
And they're taking them illegally in order to gain the monetary reward.
Right.
And that's just ridiculous to me.
But I did talk to a few people over there that had a very interesting set of people that we talk to over there, and we will have at some point, I'm sure, some sort of a documentary or synopsis of what we saw over there on our website, which people will be able to go and look at. But their private rhino owners have been, ethically, legally, humanely removing the horns from their rhinos. You dart them, you put them to sleep, and you cut it. The horn is made out of the exact same thing that our fingernails and our hair is made out of. So it's just like clipping a nail. If you go too deep, you'll hit that thing that's called the quick, and you'll bleed a little bit. But even in, that rarely happens, and even then you can seal it up. But they just cut off the top part of the horn. It continuously regrows. So, it's not affecting the rhino at all. But they've been stockpiling that horn. Okay. The private rhino owners have been stockpiling that horn. So there's this one guy that I talked to, and he said, the demand that's coming out of the East now, if you legalize the rhino horn trade, the stockpiles that we have, plus the increase in population by people now having the incentive to breed rhinos and to have more rhinos, because now they can actually sell a product and make money back.
Right. So
the population of rhinos will grow. Right now, if you took all the rhinos that we had today, we cannot supply the Far East. Right. But we can supply the Far East for long enough with the stockpiles that we already have to allow the population to get high enough to where we can supply the Far East.
Gotcha.
And I thought that was very interesting. I still think I still have a problem with it because it's not real.
Right.
It doesn't cure everything. But the way that these South Africans talk about it is, you got to get over that. It doesn't matter. They're not going to stop. So we either find the rhinos going extinct, or we find a way to supply them with what they want. Because otherwise, those are the only two options that we've got.
Right.
Basically.
Because you're not going to convince them otherwise that this
right.
this isn't what you think it is.
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand, us in America, we're one of the younger countries. Right. This is a thousands of year old medical belief that you're just not going to switch over.
Right. So that's really unfortunate.
It is.
That those are your only two solutions, because you're not going to change. You're not going to change the culture.
Right.
Right. So
right.
Let's look at the other alternatives. So
yes.
These things they don't carry over to like deer antlers, but in a sense they do.
No.
Right.
Well, yeah.
I mean, not nearly as bad as this, but I've
right.
seen situations where thankfully the antlers fall off every year.
Right.
Right. So that kind of solves your problem. You don't have to kill the animal to get the antlers. You can still get the antlers without killing them.
Yeah.
Or devastating the population because you're seeking these. It would be one awful situation if they were seeking antlers from deer and they never shed. That would be a bad situation. So that's kind of that's what you're up against here. But there is some medicinal stuff, I think, with antlers in general, right, that are in the same culture.
Yes.
What are your goals at this point? It sounds like you're trying to get a pretty good herd of rhinos going in Texas.
Yeah, and we've got the support. We've got the support from both ends of the pond. We've got just about 100 rhinos donated already, and these are donations. These are people saying, we'll even help you with the traveling costs. I mean, you guys need to pick up something. You guys need to pay something, but the rhinos themselves, we're donating them. You guys just take them. If you guys can get them over there, then just take it. And then we've got partnerships with them to where when they start breeding over here in the United States, we've got a partnership that will go into the offspring, so that, we could sell the offspring ourselves to another approved facility here in the United States, to where we could make some of our money back from the transport costs. So there is a revenue stream there, but and we've got about 30 private property people here in Texas and in Florida that have already raised their hands and said, hey, we're willing to take them. One big thing about this project, in the United States of America, every single southern white rhino in the United States of America, there is absolutely zero intentions at all on the table for any time in the future to hunt these southern white rhinos. That is not the purpose of this venture. Right. We're going to breed them, we're going to increase the population, and we're going to ship them back to their country so that we can make sure that the animal doesn't go extinct. If the South Africans feel that they've got a population that's worth hunting and they've got it approved by their governments, they can do that. Our project with the rhinos has zero hunting involved. So that's another important thing to put out there.
It sounds like they're under extreme pressure already to survive species wise.
Oh yes,
so
for sure.
Hunting, obviously, the money that comes in would help that. However,
yes,
there's a line like where you can't, like where you need to like take a lot of time off where you don't there's no disruption in recycling and breeding and growing the herd. Because at some point, like for example, in New Hampshire, where I'm at, you can't hunt bobcats.
Huh.
They're on the rise. I mean, they were severely declined.
Right.
But there was a time that we got to below a certain point where like no hunting, period, done. They're on the rise. They released a few tags this year for some trappers, but that's it. I'm seeing more and more, and I think someday you'll be able to hunt them again. But there's always that line. Like there's a line where hunting isn't going to help. No matter how much money you can bring in from hunting, it's just going to hurt the population in a sense.
Right.
But usually that money can offset some of the, or at least try to defeat some of the poachers. If there's money coming in. But at some point you got to say, look, I don't have enough rhinos. I don't have enough to even donate. We have to like completely shut it off like they did the bobcat in New Hampshire. So and I don't know how you tally these up. What should the population be for the white rhino in the world right now?
The estimated population right now is 18,000.
Okay.
Ish. And I don't know what they're trying to get to be comfortable and what they want it to be at the end of everything. If we were able to solve everything and change the culture in the Far East and stop the poaching 100% and get the numbers back to where they wanted to, I don't know what that number is. I don't know if it's 50,000 or 100,000.
Okay.
But I do know that there were 31 countries, I believe that's the right number, that had rhinos in them, and I mean that's dwindled down to like 7. So it's not really just a number. I mean, it's numbers, it's their range, it's a lot of things. I mean, in historic times there were much more, and they were spread all throughout Africa. It was not just this aggregation that was in southern Africa. And I know they'd like to see that become a possibility. But yeah, we definitely need more than 18,000. And the southern white rhino that's the other thing about that is they're the ones that are doing the best right now. The northern white rhino, the southern black rhino, the northern black rhino, there's all these different subspecies of rhinos, the greater one-horned rhino, they're all doing worse. But why the focus is on the southern white rhino so much is all those other ones have fell so far. And yes, they need our support and our attention, but let's do something with these guys while we still have a chance.
Right.
So that we don't turn around one day and we see that there's 20 of them, and then we decide to put all our support in.
Right.
It's like, while there's 18,000 of them, let's do something now before it becomes 20. So that's why we've got a lot of focus on it.
Right. And just to look at some of the conservation success stories in the United States, let's take the wild turkey, for example.
Yeah.
Or look at where deer numbers were back in the 30s.
Yeah.
Versus where they are today. At least there was some recognition that we're in trouble, and let's not get it down to the point where there won't even be enough because nobody's gonna hunt them because there won't be enough to hunt.
Right.
You can go out and you'd be out for days before you would see a deer.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Well, and it's like it's the exact what we did with the scimitar horned oryx. I don't know if you know or your viewers know, but there was a really big project with Abu Dhabi. I think it was a UAE, but private Texas ranchers were involved with it. We just took about 100 scimitar horned oryx back and reintroduced them to the wild in their native range in Chad, where they had been classified by the IUCN as extinct in the wild.
Right.
So they were effectively extinct. The only place that they existed was captive breeding outside of their native range. We just reintroduced 100 of them. We're going to try to spark that population back up in Chad. And it's a very long-term project. You got to have community outreach. You got to do all this stuff because obviously there was a reason why they went extinct the first time. You got to prevent that from happening again. It's a really big project, something that we Texans are very proud of, but that's all we're doing with this rhino project. The reason that scimitar horned oryx were in the state of Texas was because back in the 20s, there was a couple of ranchers that wanted to see something on their ranch other than a whitetail, so they bring in some scimitar horned oryx. Well, little did we know that we're just taking care of them. We're doing our thing. We hunt the old males, we breed, we trade, we sell. Before we know it, Texas has over 15,000 scimitar horned oryx. Well, they go extinct in the wild, but we've got the ability to take them back there to try to bring them out of extinction. The captive breeding reversed the extinction. And so that's all we're doing on this rhino project. It's that same thing. We've got the time right now. We can see what's coming in the future. We got lucky with the scimitar. Let's take what we learned from the scimitar and apply it to the rhino and be prepared beforehand. So now if the rhino does go extinct, you look over to the United States, we got 2,500 individuals, 3,000 individuals. We've got evolutionary potential that we can introduce back into their native lands.
Right. And at some point, you'd hope that the population got high enough where you could open up hunting effectively, bring in dollars.
Not here for us.
Not here.
Yeah, it's not even on the radar, but over there, certainly.
That's your starter culture. I mean, that's the one that you gotta kind of keep open in case things don't go so good elsewhere where you don't have as much control.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you can look back in history. This isn't just animal based. If you look back in history, you go to the grape plant, for example. In France, when we think wine, we think French wine, right?
Right.
Well, there was a virus that killed off a ton of the grape plants in the wineries, basically wiped out all of the French plants completely.
Wow.
And if it weren't for the United States growing grapes in New York State,
wow,
there would be no wine coming out of France.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
But that's the same concept, right?
Yes.
It's not just animal based. You can look at plants. It's just that you have to have a starter culture growing somewhere.
Right. Yes.
So that you can then take, and the classic example is with the grapes. They moved several grape plants back to France and they regrew French grapes. Now we have French wine again. But it had
I did not know that. That's pretty fascinating. But yes, it's the exact same concept.
Same concept, right?
Yeah.
So that you can always reintroduce the genetics of that animal back into the wild and repopulate it if things don't go well based off of the other conservation efforts.
And that's the flip side of the coin. I actually got into the only argument, the only non-supporter that I've met on this project was a South African. And he was just proud, and which I don't blame him at all for being that way. But he said South Africa, these rhinos are South African rhinos. I mean, it's a South African symbol. It's an African symbol. They don't belong in America.
Right.
And the flip side of the coin was if something happens over there, they go extinct, we can bring them back and reintroduce them and save the species. If they figure out the poaching and they figure out how to stop everything, we're still going to bring them back.
Right.
The goal is not to have an American herd. It would be really cool to see the first Texas-born rhino be relocated back to South Africa. Mm-hmm. But the goal is not to Americanize the rhino. Right. It's to keep it in its native lands. But I'm trying to explain to this guy, you can see them being bred in the United States for a period of time, or the next time you're seeing them, it's behind a glass wall at a museum.
That's
so
right.
Which one would you prefer? And it's like, we're not trying to take your rhinos. We're really not. We don't want to Americanize them. We don't want to have them here. I mean, the zoos have some herds, and there's private facilities that have herds, and it's good to have them. They're good educational tools and stuff, but we don't want to take the southern white rhino and make it the American white rhino. That is not our goal at all.
Right. And then, but you're just giving the white rhino a safety net.
Yes.
Just in case.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
And I think as a society, the Americans are good at that. We're good at preserving certain aspects of culture because we recognize that it can disappear pretty quick if you let it.
That's right.
Right?
Because we literally are a melting pot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The United States is a melting pot. We
Yes.
are a collective of many different cultures.
Yes.
And if we let, and can you imagine if we just let, dictators destroy cultures across the world, there would be no individualized cultures. And likewise with the rhino, there would be no rhinos.
Right. Yep.
Are there any other animal species that there is something like this going on as well?
On this scale, not that I know of. were the importations. The problem with the United States is, well, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but we cannot or have not imported any hoof stock into the United States for a very long time.
Okay.
And the reason for that is hoof and mouth. And
Right.
I want to say it's either the largest or second largest lobbying group in the United States is the cattle industry. And so you're going to have a hard time importing hoof stock just because of the hoof and mouth disease. And if one passed through customs and it got infected and it started running rampant, it could just destroy the cattle industry, which is huge. Which
Gotcha.
is a major thing for us. So one of the reasons that we're able to do this is obviously that the rhino is not hoof stock. But I can't think of any other animals that are on this scale where their numbers are so bad in their native lands. They're decreasing dramatically, exponentially even. And there's a big export from their native lands, import to foreign lands project. But I do know that there's other countries that are importing the southern white rhino. I think Australia's got a big import, and I think even Vietnam has a big import of the live southern white rhinos from South Africa. So
Gotcha. Okay. What, in your view, it sounds like you're deep into conservation and the understanding of conservation. Where is the deer herd in the United States at, as far as whitetails, muleys, any of the huntable deer species?
Yeah, I don't know much about the other native deer species, and it's funny because we actually consider our Texas deer a completely different species than some of those whitetail that you guys are that they're being grown out in the Midwest. I mean, it's like
they're different.
They should be classified differently. But no, in Texas, it's absolutely. It's got to be a 9 or a 10 for the whitetail deer.
Right.
I mean, our industry it's a multi-billion-dollar industry every year. We are kind of coming under a bit of heat right now from the state government about the chronic wasting disease.
Mm-hmm.
And I just got a really interesting email from one of the organizations that I belong to, which is called the Exotic Wildlife Association.
Okay.
Sent out an email that basically had some facts on what they're finding out about CWD, and it's kind of shocking because they're not finding a whole lot, but yet the regulations that they're placing on us and the amount of deer that they're killing is catastrophic, in my opinion.
Okay.
So they've had in 2015, they had 18 positives out of 32,737 samples, which is 0.055%.
Okay.
But yet they killed, thousands of deer.
Right. Okay.
Checking for the CWD.
Wow.
And it's just not good. And so now it's kind of overextended the deer. See, the exotics in the state of Texas, we are extremely low regulation on exotics.
Okay.
If I'm driving in my trailer and I got my TX number on, game warden pulls me over, and if I'm transporting deer, he can look at them, look at tags, look at this, look at that. If I'm transporting exotics, he can look at them, but there's not much he can do about it. There's no permit that I need. There's no paperwork that I need to have with me. So
really, okay.
Well, because of the CWD, they're starting to reach their hands into elk, sika, and red deer.
Right.
So now we're starting to get some regulations on the exotic industry that are within the state lines. There's always been regulations whenever you go outside of the state of Texas or bring something in from outside of the state of Texas. But now we're getting some regulations on exotics inside of the state of Texas. So it's kind of this CWD thing for us down here is going to continue to be a big deal. And I know there's a lot of lawsuits and a lot of people that are angry, but regardless of that, I would say that the deer industry here in the state of Texas for sure is steady.
Okay. Right. I agree.
Yeah.
It's steady and strong and growing.
Yes.
Is there a connection between exotics and CWD?
Yeah, it's just on the cervids. So technically in the state of Texas, elk is an exotic, red stag is an exotic, and sika deer are exotics.
Okay.
Like they haven't extended it to fallow or axis or anything like that yet. It's really just those three that are considered CWD susceptible species, but elk are not considered native game in Texas. They're still considered exotic. So
Gotcha. Interesting. You have some very interesting work going on. Is there anything else that you've got that you're involved with that is on the cusp of something relative to the rhino as far as intricacies or things that, I mean, we're way beyond our boundaries on this show right now. I know that because we never talk about the white rhino, but it's very interesting and it's a good lesson in conservation no matter what no matter what the species is.
Well, I mean, it's just for us, what's important to us is the fact that there's a lot of really good organizations out there doing a lot of really good work trying to conserve wildlife species. And always be careful, always do your research, find a website, find a negative website about it, just kind of do your learning before you go out and start supporting people. But there's a lot of really good organizations that are doing a lot of good things. For us, we understand that the Bengal tiger is having a really hard time right now. There's not a whole lot that we can do with the Bengal tiger except for send money to a foreign government and hope it gets spent the right way.
Right.
What we can do and what's important to us is physically interacting with the species that we're trying to save, so that our money isn't going somewhere where it's not tangible. We need it to be something tangible. So what we focus on is the things that we can directly be involved with. So the reticulated giraffe, which just recently got classified as endangered, the Grevy's zebra, which is a highly endangered species, all of our lemurs, the ring-tailed lemur, red ruffed lemur, black and white ruffed lemurs, they're all critically endangered. So we've got breeding herds and breeding programs of all of those species and more. We house over 80 different species of exotics. Okay. On the property.
Gotcha.
So from every continent except Antarctica.
Do you ever skeptically look at the numbers when it comes to when they're deeming something endangered or threatened? Do you ever wonder whether or not those are accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, in the wild, a lot of times, the information that I've heard on the addax, there's an antelope from northern Africa called the addax, and it's critically endangered right now. But I want to say somebody was telling me at some point the reason it's critically endangered instead of extinct in the wild was because there were 3 of them that were seen like 10 years ago or something like that. You know, it's like, well, we know those 3 were out there, so they may still be alive, so they're still critically endangered. They're not extinct, So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some of that going on, but I would say for the most part, there's some pretty good scientific minds and people on the ground at IUCN, and they've got a big convention where they come together every year, and they're probably about as accurate as you can get.
Okay.
But yeah, there's probably some divergence there.
Like I always feel like, unfortunately, that sometimes it's not always science based. Sometimes it's politically based.
Oh yeah, that is true.
You know what I mean? Like, look at the wolf might be an example of that, where I feel like some of the rules and regulations that were placed on what, if you can just get into the category of threatened or endangered, then we can put a halt to the hunting aspects of a certain species.
Right. Yes.
But the drive was dictated from a side of politics that wasn't any more interested in. They were more interested in just keeping the hunters at bay because that's the opposition. They're on the team. They're on the other team. Therefore, we're going to do whatever we can to stop them from progressing with a hunt because we don't want them doing what we don't want them to do.
Yeah, well, and I think there's other rules, other laws that really focus in on that. Like, for example, the polar bear. When it went, I think it was back in the Bush administration where they made it to where it was illegal to import any product of polar bear into the United States. So it was still legal to go up and hunt them. It was still legal to import everything that you wanted to China or to Mexico or to South America. Holman, Canada or whatever up in the Arctic Circle was a local community. I know that they still had a quota that they had to harvest a certain amount because they were still coming into their town and getting in their trash cans. Plus, there is a huge factor about polar bears that a lot of people don't know, that the big males practice infanticide, which means that when they come out of hibernation or when they're extra hungry, they will go and kill the young But it's only really the old males that'll do that. So by harvesting an old male, you could potentially save a couple babies. So there's a lot of stuff there. But anyway, you couldn't import their products back to the United States. So that was something that was completely politically motivated, in my opinion, because the United States was saying you can still go kill them. You just can't bring your mountain back with you. and scientifically, we still needed to go and hunt them.
Right.
But we couldn't bring their products back. But China could, Mexico could. So that didn't have to do with numbers. It didn't have to do with science, in my opinion. That had to do with trying to prevent people from hunting them by not allowing them to keep their trophy.
Exactly. And so that's where politics blends with science, and it shouldn't. And
yes,
it really angers me when it does.
Yeah, it does. I know.
It really burns me deep.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
Well, it sounds like you got a lot going on, and I think your efforts are very notable. And it's fascinating that you kind of came from a hunting aspect, but ended up getting into a deeper rooted conservation effort than maybe even dreamed of. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very cool stuff. So let's talk a little bit about deer hunting.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's get back to the focus of the show.
Let's get back to well, yes, it is a deer hunting podcast.
That's right.
But I mean, the conservation stuff comes up now and then, and it's fun to go deep on that stuff because I think conservation is global, and it should be. And I don't ever want to lose sight of that.
Right.
How important it is for conservation to be involved in hunting and for hunting to be involved in conservation.
Right.
They go hand in hand. They are married, and they always should be. Now, you're a hunter, and when I asked you to think about a memorable deer story, you said...
There's been too many of them. It's hard to remember them all.
Yeah, I've killed a lot of deer.
You grow up in Texas. I mean, that's just what you do is you deer hunt.
Right.
And I've killed a lot of management deer. I've killed a lot of cold deer. I'm talking about a 8-point deer, what we call an 8-point deer, 4 on each side. Yep. That's 7-8 years old. So I grew up doing that, and it's a great way to learn as a youth how to hunt, how to stalk and track, and how to shoot properly, and all of the stuff that goes into being a good ethical hunter can be done whitetail hunting here in Texas. So
right.
That's really what I grew up doing.
You brought up an interesting point. Where is that line where we go, like I say 10-pointer?
Right.
It sounds like you say 10-pointer in Texas.
Well, and oh yeah. So Colorado, it's the mule deer guys, I think is what it is.
Is that where the
mule
line
deer guys come out and they say I saw a 4-pointer come in. Okay. I said, you mean a little forky? And they go, no, 4 on one, 4 on the other. I'm like, that's an 8-point.
That's an 8-point.
Yeah, not a 4-point.
I think the line is
mule deer guys.
I think you're right. I think about the line where mule deer start to become a natural in abundance. That's where the hunters come in. I think they kind of carried that 10-pointer into the 5x5 category, and it carried over into all hunting.
And we call them brow tines, and they call them eye guards, I think. So.
Exactly, and it's kind of like there's a line. There's definitely a line where things change when you're describing the deer that you're after.
Yes,
that's kind of funny.
Absolutely.
All right, so I asked you about a memorable deer hunt to take us down. Did one pop into your head?
Yeah, there actually is. So it's actually the biggest deer that I ever killed, and I don't know how many people on your show have been through this, but I'm going to assume that it's more than one. So I was a young kid.
Okay.
I was on a management hunt. I'd actually stepped up from the coal hunt, and so I was getting to shoot something that would have been mountable, something that I could have hung up in the house and everything. So I was real excited. But I was a youngster, and I was rifle hunting, and we're in a blind, and it's the wee hour. The sun's kind of past the horizon, but it's still light enough to see. And we see my management buck come in, the one that we'd been hunting. So comes in this field and he's grazing across, and I'm waiting for a shot, never really get one. He's with this other buck. They go behind a cedar tree, and this buck pops out, and I'm with a guide, and the guide is filming everything, which may have been my saving grace. Okay. Deer pops out, and I said, is it that one? The guide goes, yes, it's that one. So I've got a clean shot. You want me to shoot that one that just popped out? Yes, shoot it. Boom. Great shot. Animal runs 20 yards, falls over. We're celebrating all that other stuff. So we get out of the stand, and I mean, a management deer is a 130-inch deer. is like the top, 125 to 135, really, you're looking in that range. So we walk up on this deer, and it is a 173 inch 16-point deer. And my heart just dropped, because it's a very prestigious ranch, and I was, in a place where I didn't want to screw up, and it was my first management hunt, and fortunately we got everything on video, and the owner of the place was just such a good guy, and he had known us for several years. He's a good friend of ours, and he laughed it off, and he said that had nothing to do with you, and I don't want you to feel guilty. This is an amazing trophy. You should be happy. So everything ended up great, but that mount still hangs in my house, and every time I look at it, I remember that story.
Gotcha. That's a good story.
Yeah.
Very good. Did you spend most of your time hunting on ranches in that aspect?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I grew up hunting just, Texas is 99% privately owned.
Okay.
I think New Mexico is probably like 20% privately owned. New Mexico has a lot of public land. So
they've always said that
I actually
Texas
grew up,
could be its own country if it had to.
That's exactly right. But I grew up hunting a lot in the mountains, the Gila and the Pecos, and up northern New Mexico. And I grew up hunting the mountains a lot. And then when we came to Texas, we'd typically be on private hunting ranches, but that's what you've got in Texas.
Right.
We don't have much of the other stuff.
Gotcha. So I was just reading on your website, and I got to ask you this question. The SWC, which stands for Stewards of Wildlife Conservation.
Yes.
And that you have a breeder permit for all kinds of species, which would explain the ability to breed the wild rhino, or the white rhino, I should say. You also have a scientific white-tailed deer breeder permit. Can you tell me about that? Yeah,
that's just it's just the state Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, the state regulatory agency that looks over. So all of the deer in the state of Texas are owned by the state of Texas. So I've got deer in a whitetail pen system, a scientific deer breeder system.
Okay.
Which is where we can, make sure that the deer get bred a certain way. We can determine which bucks go in with which does. So it increases the productivity of the breeding. And even though those deer are in a pen, we're feeding them, we're caring for them. We can trade them back and forth to other ranches freely and make money off of them and everything. We don't own them. They're owned by the state of Texas. So
Gotcha.
Texas Parks and Wildlife has a scientific deer breeder permit that you have to obtain to be able to have that breeder system.
Okay.
When they're loose on your property, you don't have to have that permit. But if you're going to have a scientific deer breeder system, you have to have that permit.
Gotcha. And do you do any of that on your ranches that you have?
Yeah, we do. We've got we do some intensive breeding programs with the white-tailed deer.
Gotcha. What is the purpose of the program?
The purpose of the program really is to increase the value of the deer.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's like I said, the deer industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry that pays for a lot of different things.
Right.
Pay people's jobs, increase in land value. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into the deer industry itself. Even just, there's people that'll improve habitats just to have white-tailed deer. So
sure, of course.
And that value behind them is what keeps people coming back to Texas for the hunting of the white-tailed deer.
Okay.
But it also keeps us in the business of making sure that we have white-tailed deer.
Gotcha. So when you say you're increasing the value, what does that mean? Are you trying
with a whitetail, it's mostly antler. I mean, you're looking for bigger antlers. And there's some people. The way that we do it, I mean, there's bad eggs in every group, and I'm not necessarily saying they're bad eggs, but there's some people that are growing these 600-inch white-tailed deer, and it's just got kickers and stickers going everywhere.
Yeah, these are the folks that where we have a fairly blue collar hunting public on our Facebook page, and if we throw up any kind of a fenced kill, they go crazy. I mean, it's just they just attack.
Yes.
So that's the side that is in huge controversial.
Yes. Well,
discussion.
And there's positives and negatives. And I've been to ranches here in Texas that didn't really, I wasn't too happy to look at and realize that it was a hunting ranch. Not saying that I've hunted at those places, but I've been to them before. But there's a really good definition that the Exotic Wildlife Association has for fair chase hunting. And I can't say it verbatim off the top of my head, but I could try to get it to you so you could post it on your Facebook. But It's basically that animal has the ability to realize your presence as a human and to evade you effectively.
Right.
So if you're in a 200-acre pasture that's just grass with no trees, that's not a fair situation. That's not fair chase. So as far as the high fence hunting, and I mean, this is one of the things that I just beat my head against the wall. And I am one of those guys that does draw lines. Don't get me wrong, but we have got to stop fighting ourselves.
Yes.
If you're a high fence guy versus a free range guy, if you're a crossbow hunter versus a bow hunter, or a compound versus a recurve, or scoped rifles, or whatever, we got to stop fighting ourselves.
Yep.
We have got to learn how to portray the message to the general public of what we do and why we do it and why it's good for the species survival.
Right.
And we need to stop infighting, and we need to educate the general public. That's my opinion, because they've already got their arguments. We don't need to help them out by doing the high fence debate, in my opinion. As long as it is fair chase, ethical hunting on a high fence, there should be no argument behind that.
Right. And that's kind of the conclusion I came to, and people may disagree, but we don't need another line in the sand.
That's right.
There's already one big one.
That's right. That's exactly
we
right.
Don't need a bunch of little ones. Let's all just forget about that. If you want to hunt a high fence, then go do it. If that's your style hunting that you like to do. If you want to hunt over bait, go hunt over bait. If you want to raise deer and kill them, and all this is legal, then do it.
Yes.
But at least be on the same team, be supportive. And if that's not your preference, then don't be barking out at the people
that's right.
that are doing it, because you don't have to do it. It's your preference. This is America. We can do whatever we want as long as it's legal, and we don't have to tell the other person how to do it, or even you can express like, well, hey, it's not really my thing. No big deal.
Yeah.
You want to do it, you go do it.
That's right.
Personally,
that's exactly right.
I'm not really a high fence hunter kind of guy, but I'll be the last guy to tell you not to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not a big high fence hunter guy myself, but high fence hunting is what took the scimitar horned oryx from extinction to existing naturally in their native habitat.
Right.
So that's something to stick in the pot there.
Exactly.
So.
I would never say don't do this because it's harming our culture as hunters. It's not.
Right. It's not. It's really not. It's actually helping it quite a bit.
Exactly. We might someday need those genetics. We don't know.
That's right. That's right.
So it sounds like you're involved in some breeding and not genetically altering. That would be the wrong word, but you're using genetics to help the deer herd and keep it a thriving situation.
Right. Yes.
Economically and physically.
Correct. Yes. Absolutely.
And I got to ask you, what? I mean, we always hear is it genetics or is it environment or is it nutrition?
On antler growth?
Yeah.
Oh, I believe it's both, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's and nutrition I think has a lot to do with it as well.
I agree. I think it's
you could have certain years where I've had a year, because they're in a pin system, in a scientific deer breeding pin system. A lot of times you have a lot of bucks together, so you have to cut their antlers off, because if you leave them on when they get to in the middle of the rut, when they start fighting each other, they can't get away from each other. There's nowhere to run to the other end of the pasture, so they can end up hurting each other. And I've seen years where you can have a 200-inch deer and you cut his antler, and I mean, you turn it upside down and the inside of the antler looks like just like honeycomb, like it's real porous inside of the core of the antler.
Right. And
then that same deer, next year that wasn't a drought year, and we they got a different type of protein, or we switched something up on them, and you cut that same guy off, and now he's 215. And you look inside of that antler, and it's it's solid core all the way through. So I think it's environmental, nutrition, and genetics for sure.
Yeah, we've had similar conversations with Jason Obermiller from Rackology.
Yeah,
who has been on our show before, and he's a taxidermist on the side, but he's also developed a formula for some mineral supplements that
Right.
he can tell when the deer are coming to a shop that they might have big racks, but he knows darn well that there's something missing from that deer's nutritional pattern because they're light antlers, they're not dense. So
yes.
There was something here that wasn't quite right, and maybe that's the genetics playing a part without the nutrition.
Yeah, well, and another thing about the genetics that a lot of people, I don't want to say a lot, but people sometimes fail to realize is that the female has a whole lot to do with it.
Right.
You know, it's like when you're breeding something where the males have a hood ornament and the females don't.
Right.
You know, you tend to look, that's a big male, I'm going to breed him to this female. Well, that female that you decide to breed him to is just as important as him himself.
Absolutely.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then when you get down to your X and Y chromosomes,
that's right.
there are patterns passed on through the female from the male that were her father, and her grandfather.
Exactly.
So there are pieces of that puzzle that you can't necessarily see in the doe, but it's certainly very important about the genetics, just like in humans. Our grandfathers, or I have white hair almost now that I'm past 40, and my grandfather and my uncle both had white hair.
Yeah.
But my mom doesn't.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know that.
Yeah. And it is something when you get into that deer breeding. I was for a couple of years. I'm not anymore, but it can almost drive you insane because you know how complex it can become.
Right.
And then you've got to wait, typically a year or two to see, what you did, how well you did,
right. Yeah,
with your breeding. So it's something you can beat your head against the wall quite a bit.
Hence the scientific aspect of the development. Got it. All right, let's get into 10 rapid fire questions.
10 rapid fire.
10 rapid. I don't know if you're ready for that. Everybody says, come on.
Let's do it.
Say that. That's pretty good. All right, so I haven't prepped you for these, and they're just better that way. So let's start with number one.
Okay.
All right, you've killed a bunch of deer in your lifetime, as you mentioned. What's your number one hunting tip of all time?
Oh, number one hunting tip. Learn to be a good stalker. It's not necessarily about how far you can shoot out or how good you can shoot. It's about getting close enough to that animal to where you've got that little bit of room for error so that you make a good shot and you put that animal down ethically.
Very cool. All right. I like that. I like getting close. That's my thing.
Yeah. I'm a bow hunter. So I rarely hunt with a rifle. Typically only hunts where they don't allow bow. So.
Gotcha. I don't, and I don't mind bow or gun. I mean, I'm happy with.
No, I don't either.
With either. But either way, I like my shots to be close.
Yes, I do too. I agree with you.
I love the aspects of it.
It's better for us. It's better for the animal. It's just better all around.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, coming from New Hampshire where it's 85% timber, I don't know what a 600-yard shot feels like.
Yeah.
I don't have that. I couldn't tell you. I mean, I got to go. I have to seek out special property to go figure out what this is going to be like.
You need to come down into Mexico and do some pronghorn hunting.
Right. See, a long shot would be foreign to me. So if I can get it at 30 yards or less, I'm a happy camper. And I don't care if it's a 30-06 or my Matthews bow. I'm just happy when it's closer. All right.
I agree.
Okay, number two, what's the one thing that you can't hunt without? We all have these things we leave in the truck or leave at home, and it drives us a little crazy if we're like, oh, man, I wish I had that blank. What's that thing for you?
My release.
Your release.
For sure. I am so conscious of that dang thing. Every time I go on a hunt, I have two backups that are always in my bow case and my backpack.
There you go.
I've got one in the bow, one in the bow case, one in the backpack just in case.
Good plan. All right. Yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve in life?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if it's necessarily a pet peeve, but passive aggressiveness.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I say, I prefer the company of animals to people 10-1.
Yep.
And it's because they don't talk behind your back. They don't play games. They're straightforward. They are who they are. And that's exactly how they're going to be. And I don't like fakeness. I don't like it when somebody smiles and looks you in the face and then tells you one thing, goes behind your back and does something else. It drives me crazy.
Gotcha. You said you're in your 30s. Is that right, Cole?
I'm going to be 30 next year.
You're going to be 30 next year. Right? So you haven't quite got there yet.
I'm almost 30. Yeah.
Okay. Being almost 30, what would you tell the 15-year-old Cole Reid knowing what you know today?
That's a good one. That's a really difficult one because I am in such an amazing place in my life right now. I'm married to a wonderful, beautiful woman. I live out on the middle of a 3,000 acre property with 8,000 animals. 80 different species. Sorry. I'm doing what I love. I'm working with animals. I get to travel. I'm not sure I'd tell him to do anything because the choices that he's made to get me to this point, if I changed any of those, I don't know if my life would be as good as it is right now.
Right,
not to be all arrogant or
I don't
cocky about how good my life is, but I'm really in a good spot right now.
Good, man. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody is finally there because that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's excellent. All right. So you meet a stranger in a hotel lobby at a hunting convention somewhere in the world, and they ask you what you do for a living. What do you tell them?
I tell them I'm a wildlife conservationist.
Very cool. All right.
Yeah.
Straightforward.
Yeah. Yes.
What did you have for breakfast this morning?
I don't eat breakfast.
You don't eat breakfast?
No,
Nothing.
I'm not a breakfast guy. I had a couple cups of coffee, and then I had for lunch I had a sandwich, and I had some Eldsdeer beef sticks.
Eldsdeer beef sticks. All right.
Yeah. Jalapeno cheese beef sticks.
Okay.
They're really good.
It sounds similar to my dinner that I had.
Yeah, there you go.
I found some bacon that I chopped into little bits. I put it in the pan. Found some cod. Put that over the bacon. And then I had a couple of fried eggs on top of it.
That sounds so good. Oh, my goodness, that sounds good.
It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And the cod, coming right out of the ocean from where I live. So it just doesn't get any better than that.
No, that's awesome. Yeah. That's making my mouth water.
Good. Excellent. Because you made my mouth water. So.
That's right.
All right, very good. Okay. You get your own billboard on the side of a highway anywhere in the country. It's a blank canvas. What would you put on it?
I have the answer for this, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Okay.
If you circle back around to that question, then I'll give it to you here in just a second.
Okay. I'll move on to the next one. We'll get back to that after.
Yeah, back to that one.
All right. If I say the word successful to you, who's the first person that pops into your head and why?
Ooh. I'd probably say my father.
Okay.
Under that regard, he is somebody who's not, he taught me how to truly be successful, and he taught me that it's not a financial is not what makes you successful or not.
Right.
He happens to be successful financially, but his success is not measured in finances, and that's a lesson that he passed down to me. He's where I describe my life, wonderful wife and a great job and something that he loves to do, and he gets to travel, and he's surrounded by friends and family who just adore him and love him, and I mean he is very successful in life through love and experiences.
Very nice. All right.
I got your billboard.
Okay, let's go back to the billboard question. What do you got?
The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that someone else will save it.
There you go.
Yes.
That sums up your life, I think, right there.
Yeah.
I'm with you, man.
Yeah, my other favorite quote of all time is actually a David Attenborough quote, but it wouldn't necessarily be as good for a billboard, but it's a belief of mine. I wish the world was twice as big and half of it was still unexplored.
Oh, man, wouldn't that be fantastic?
Yeah. I like that.
Oh, my goodness. Half the world unexplored. Oh,
yes. And the world was twice as big.
Wow.
Basically, that nothing had been discovered yet, and you were here to do it all.
Can you imagine?
Cool.
Can you imagine what that day would be like?
It'd be cool.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 9. What's a day in your life look like?
Nowadays, I get up early. I try to get outside and check on animals and check on hit the reticulated giraffes, the zebras, just going around property, making sure everybody's fed, watered. Unfortunately, these days I'm doing a lot more media marketing. We're working on our rhino importation. Obviously, there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork outside the rhino importation that is required for us to be legal and legally raise all these animals. So
yep.
I end up finding myself in the office quite a bit these days. But it's an ebb and flow thing, and I understand that. There's certain times of the year that require you to be in the office, and there's certain times in the year where you're not going to get into the office for a week and people are going to be screaming at you. right now, the day in the life of Cole actually consists of quite a bit of office work. So unfortunately, but I do get out there every day, make sure I check on the animals, check on the projects and all that good stuff. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And number 10, what's a deer hunting day in your life look like?
Ooh, I'm an evening hunting kind of guy.
Okay.
So I do love morning hunts. It depends on the hunt and how rowdy we are and how much fun we're having the night before. But I'm one of those guys that likes to, I really enjoy, I'll never forget, I was sitting in a tree stand in, where was that? Colorado, maybe? Or maybe it was just northern New Mexico, but I was sitting in a tree stand. The snow was waist deep. I'm freezing my butt off. I'm shaking. I've got every jacket and undergarment that I could possibly have, and I'm just shivering, and I'm sitting in the snow. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to pull the bowstring back because I was shaking so bad from being cold. I really do enjoy hunting in South Texas in a deer blind where you can relax and have a drink and enjoy the animals and watch the rut. And for me, a day in the life of hunting is just the cap off. If I don't shoot a single deer, it's a night well spent.
Very nice. That's the 10 rapid fires. I think you did
10 rapid fire. All right.
You're all done with that. All right. So where can we find more about you, Cole, if we wanted to learn more about the Stewards of Wildlife or any of the efforts you have going on?
Yeah. So the website is www.stewardsofwildlife.org. It's a really great website. We've got a great marketing and media team that have put everything together. You can go through and learn more about us. You can see the big projects that we have going on right now, the rhino, the zebras, the damas, the sable, giraffe, bongo, lemurs. You can see some of our conservation partners. And like I said, I mean, for us, what we're trying to do is garner support. I mean, the more people we can get supporting us, the more money that we can gain from the general public, the more we can educate the general public, the better off everybody is. But, don't take my word for it. Do your research. Learn as much as you can about us. I think my number's on the website. I think we've got an email address on there that's info@Stewards of Wildlife. That actually comes physically to me. So ask us questions, talk to us. If there's anything you want to know, let us know, and we'll try to answer it.
All right, very good, man. I'm glad we were able to have this talk, and your efforts kind of remind me of a TED Talk that I once saw about the wild lion, and it was a fellow that was giving the talk, and he was very, very at one time anti-hunting because he felt that the hunt was going to destroy his herd more than it actually was helping.
Right.
Because they're already having challenges with poachers. But as it turns out, as his research went in, he realized that hunting is a crucial aspect of conservation in that the money that was raised by allowing some lions to be hunted and killed far outweighed the poaching efforts because you were able to hire the police and watch the herd and protect the herd with the money that you raised from allowing some animals to be killed. They realized that that's the only way to make this happen successfully is to allow hunting to exist side by side through conservation because it actually drives the money and makes it a valuable aspect so that herd can survive.
Yes, absolutely.
And he did a complete 180 on hunting and said hunting is crucial to the survival of lions.
Yeah, and I mean, there's something to be said for hunters about our ecological impact. Right. If you have a game park, a safari drive-through game park in Africa, and you have somebody who is an anti-hunter, wildlife welfare activist, I don't know what you want to call them, goes to that place as they're anti-hunting. A lot of the times, I'm not saying every one of them, but a lot of the times those people require running water, built facilities that have four walls, doors, closing doors. The Jeeps that they drive around have those, 6 benches in the back of them for big parties, and that takes up gas. You have to build on paved roads. Whereas the hunter goes, and not all of them, but can stay in a tent, can sleep out on the ground, will go to the bathroom behind a tree, will go on a bumpy road. And all the hunts that I've ever been on in Africa have been on really rugged terrain, so there is less of an ecological impact and there is more of a financial impact when a hunter goes than when a non-hunter goes in general.
Right. Exactly. And that's the point that I think this whole show is about, is that hunting and conservation are dual equal efforts that need each other.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Cole. This has been an absolute pleasure and an honor, and I had a really good time talking to you about all the aspects that you're into relative to conservation and the white rhino and the other things that you were able to bring to light for us relative to deer hunting and relative to the global aspects of what you're dealing with. And I learned a lot talking to you. So thank you very much for coming on the show and opening up for us.
Yeah, really appreciate you having me, and I really appreciate what you do, because we've got a local guy here in Texas. His name is Alan Warren, and I did a radio show with him, and I was on as one of his conservation heroes, and he said, "Who's a conservation hero for you?" And I said, Alan, it's you. And I will say the same thing to you, because you guys are a voice that is getting out there, and in my opinion, we need to educate the general public. We need to talk to them. We need to have the conversation, and you are the piece that gets that message out. So thank you for what you do, and thanks for allowing me to be a part of it.
It's our pleasure, and thank you so much, Cole, for those kind of words. And we'll have to have you back again someday. If
absolutely.
Maybe we can talk a little bit more deer hunting and give us an update on what you have going on with the white rhino.
That'd be good.
Cole blew me away, really, when it comes down to it. You wouldn't think that somebody could be such a deep thinker and apply such deep activism, in a sense, to get this whole project underway. I mean, imagine yourself saying, I need a herd of 2,500 rhino just in case the population goes kaput in the other parts of the world.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense, though, really.
It makes a lot of sense. I loved his example of the onyx, how they inadvertently, because of high fence hunting, when that species basically became extinct, they were able to take from their population that they already had in some of these high fenced areas and repopulate the area where it came from. But they have a lot of these animals in Texas now that are actually huntable species, even though they're exotics.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a whole lot of effort to not only save an animal from extinction, but also be able to create habitat for the animal to thrive and survive in here.
Right. It just seems like you should always have something in your back pocket, even if it goes against the natural ways, because the natural way didn't work. Obviously, there's too much poaching or whatever.
Right.
So always have a culture in your back pocket. Well, that's very cool. Thank you to Cole Reid for joining us on the Deer Hunting Podcast. And Dusty, do we have a Chubby Tines tip of the week this week?
Yeah, just getting into a little bit about...
The Chubby Tines tip of the week is sponsored by Morse's Sporting Goods. Firearms, used firearms, bows, used bows, located at 85 Kentucky Falls Road in Hillsborough, New Hampshire. Give Jim a call at 603-464-3444, morsessportinggoods.com. Your dollars go further in New Hampshire. There's no sales tax. Morse's Sporting Goods.
Your feed and that kind of stuff. And, a lot of guys put out feed and they put it out in a deer feeder or a timing feeder that disperses a certain amount. Make sure there's value to that. And what I mean by that, you can research what exactly a deer needs as far as protein, mineral, salt intake, all the nutrition that a white-tailed deer would need. And if you take the time and research that, then you can apply that research and that knowledge into what you're purchasing to put out for feed. Now, if there's times where you could be wasting your money because some of the stuff that you buy has nothing that even has any value to a deer's nutritional factors, and it just, pretty much a filler. You're just giving it to the deer, they're getting full on it, and that's all it's doing. So make sure that you do your research on what kind of feed that you're purchasing. Every feed bag has a nutritional tag on it.
Right.
Which tells you all what all the ingredients are. And if you can take an evening or two and do some research and write some things down, that's, obviously protein, mineral, do your research, figure out what the deer need, and then apply that to your purchases. And it should make your herd healthier and grow bigger antlers.
Very nice, man. And that's actually one of the a topic that we kind of touched on during the interview, which was kind of neat, is that if you can, the deer might grow antlers, but the density might be relative to the nutrition, and I think you brought up a great point there. Be aware and do some education and educate yourself about what you're putting into your deer herd if you are in fact supplementing the herd.
Yeah, it's amazing how education as far as nutrition is free. It's available at a finger's tip or a click away.
Right.
You just Google search it and do some research on it, and education's free when it comes to nutrition as far as keeping a healthier herd.
Very nice, man. Very cool. Well, Dusty, this has been another fantastic episode. I'd like to say thank you to all of our sponsors, including Morse's Sporting Goods for sponsoring the Chubby Tines Tip of the Week. I'd also like to say thank you to Advanced Takedown Tree Stands, Covert Scouting Cameras, the Horny Buck Seed Company, and the Euro Hanger. All those products we get behind 100%, and we can't do this show without them, so we sincerely appreciate their support. It's really, really a blessing. Dusty, where can we find you when we're not in the studios talking about deer hunting?
You can shoot me an email, dusty@bigbuckregistry.com. You can look me up on Facebook, Chubby Tines Outdoors, or ship me a follow request at Chasing Antler on Instagram and Twitter. Jay, where can the people reach out to you when you're not on the mic?
Well, I think likewise the best place is an email, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. You can contact me for all types of aspects of the show, whether it's you like it and want to see a certain guest, or you want an improvement, or you want to participate in the harness program. All of it is available through contacts with me, jay@bigbuckregistry.com. If you'd like to just join us as a group in general, you can visit our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/bigbuckregistry. If you'd like to submit a buck, it's bigbuckregistry.com/mybuck, and all the instructions will be right there on how to get your buck featured in front of 250,000 diehard deer hunting fans on our Facebook page. We're also on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We are on YouTube, and on YouTube you can do a couple things. We've been doing this live show on Thursday nights. We did skip one, but we will be back. So check us out live Thursday nights on our Facebook page around 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And if you'd like to see our past episodes, you can go to our YouTube channel. All of those are listed right there. But you can also get an audio version or a video version of our audio relative to our podcast, so you can listen to all of our shows right there on YouTube, and that's bigbuckregistry.com/YouTube. Other than that, you can listen on Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and the Libsyn channel, and we're also on the Outdoor Podcast channel. I think that's everywhere we're at, my friend.
That's a whole lot of big buck, Jay.
Sure is, man. I'm Jay Scott.
I'm Dusty Phillips.
And this is the Big Buck Registry's Deer Hunting Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Can't wait.